My name is Emily. I'm 32 years old, and tonight I can't tell if what I'm about to write is a confession, a warning, or just my last, trembling attempt to understand what's happening to me. 3 weeks ago, my phone rang in the middle of the night, the kind of hour when nothing good ever comes. A polite, rehearsed voice told me my mother was dead. Alone, in that house I hadn't set foot in since I was 15. She was found sitting by the window in her old chair, eyes fixed on the forest beyond the garden wall, as if she'd been waiting for someone to come out of the dark and stand with her in the night. We hadn't spoken in years. She was a difficult woman, strict, cold, clutching her religion like a dagger pointed inward. Even when I was little, I knew there were things in that house that weren't spoken of, rules I was too young to understand but old enough to fear. So I left, and she let me go without a word. But death doesn't care about distance. The lawyer told me I was the sole heir. I almost laughed when he said it, as if she'd left me anything but broken prayers and heavy shadows. The house is old, moss crawling up its stones like veins on dead skin. The village it stands in is the sort that feels forgotten by time, a scatter of roofs crouched under the forest's edge, where the road ends and the woods begin. I went back because I had to sign papers, collect keys, erase the last trace of her. I thought I'd be there for an hour, two at most. But when I crossed the threshold, memory met me like a cold wind. The air smelled of dust, lavender, and something else, something sickly like spoiled fruit rotting in the walls. I should have left that same night, but I didn't. The first night, I told myself I'd sleep on the old sofa, sign the papers in the morning, and be gone by noon. I didn't unpack, didn't open any doors I didn't have to. I just sat in the living room as dusk crawled in through the lace curtains, the same ones from my childhood, yellowed now, moth-bitten. I thought I'd feel relief when darkness came, like the worst of it would hide behind the walls until morning. But the house felt awake in the dark, listening. I wrapped myself in an old blanket and drifted off, but some part of me never really slept. When I opened my eyes again, the clock on the wall ticked 2:43. I lay still, listening. There was a creak, then another, slow, cautious, like someone shifting their weight from one floorboard to the next. Above me, I wanted to believe it was the house settling, an old roof protesting the wind. But the steps were too measured, too alive. I crept into the hallway, stared up at the attic hatch. It looked just like I remembered, the small square door my mother always kept locked. I pulled the cord. The hatch swung down, groaning on rusty hinges. I flicked the light switch at the base of the stairs. Nothing. Darkness pressed down like a hell breath. I told myself, it's just the wind. I climbed halfway up the ladder anyway, enough to see the attic floor, empty, blanketed in decades of dust. No footsteps, no intruder. Just the stale smell of wood and something else, something damp. I shut the hatch, forced the latch closed until it clicked. Back on the sofa, I lay awake until dawn bled through the windows. In the morning, the attic door was hanging open again. I told myself I must have forgotten to latch it properly. I hadn't slept well. Maybe I was imagining more than I heard. I spent the day clearing stacks of brittle newspapers and unopened letters that my mother had hoarded like brittle memories. The house felt like a mausoleum, each drawer another small grave. By evening, I found her old Bible on the nightstand in her bedroom. Open to the same page, corners damp with fingerprints. Under it, tucked between the mattress and the wall, was a leather-bound notebook. My mother's handwriting, tight and nervous, looped across every page. I didn't read it. Not then. I slept again on the sofa. This time I left the lights on. At 3:07 a.m., I woke to a sound that didn't belong in any house. Not the wind, not the wood, but a dragging, scraping noise like fingernails across plaster. It came from inside the walls, traveling behind the old portraits that lined the corridor. I sat up, heart hammering. The attic door was shut this time, but I didn't trust it anymore. I crept to the hallway and pressed my ear to the wall. The scratching stopped. Then faintly I heard it, the smallest, saddest cry. A child's whimper, as if someone were trying not to be heard. I stumbled back, knocking an old frame to the floor. The glass cracked in a jagged grin. In the photo, my mother and me on the porch. I must have been 6 or 7. But when I looked closer, there was something else, a shadow behind the screen door, shaped like a boy, half hidden by the frame's broken corner. I didn't remember him. I didn't want to. I slept with the Bible on my chest that night, but the scratching went on until dawn. The next morning, I couldn't stand it anymore. I pulled the broken photograph from its cracked frame and studied it under the cold light from the kitchen window. There, behind my small, smiling face, was a boy. Faint, blurred, standing just inside the porch door, like he wasn't meant to be seen at all. I ransacked old drawers, boxes of brittle letters, and brittle-smelling photo albums. Page after page, me and my mother. Holidays, birthdays, cold Sunday mornings in the garden. But in 2 more photos, I saw him again, always at the edge, half hidden behind my mother's skirts or peering from an upstairs window. I called the lawyer that afternoon. I asked if there were records, birth certificates, anything. He said there were none. I was the only child on any paper that mattered. But the house didn't care about papers. It knew something else. By nightfall, I had no choice but to open her notebook. The pages crackled under my fingers like dry leaves. She wrote of the voice from the attic, the stain in the ceiling, the shadow she couldn't cleanse with prayer. And there, scrawled over and over in the margins, was the name, Michael. Michael, a brother I never remembered. A ghost, or worse, a secret alive behind the walls. At 3:23 a.m., the scraping in the ceiling turned into footsteps. This time, they didn't stay above me. They came down the attic ladder, one creaking rung at a time. I didn't move. I lay frozen on the sofa, staring at the ceiling as the footsteps reached the hallway. Each step was slow, careful, like a child afraid of waking someone. Then silence. I sat up, heart pounding, and forced myself to listen. Nothing but the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I grabbed my phone and the old brass flashlight from the kitchen drawer, the same one my mother used to keep by her bedside when storms knocked the power out. I told myself I'd check the attic in daylight, but some part of me, the part that remembered cold floors and whispered bedtime prayers, knew I wouldn't sleep until I did. The attic hatch yawned open above the stairs. I climbed up, breath caught in my throat. The beam of my flashlight cut through clouds of dust and old cobwebs. The usual junk was there, broken furniture, trunks spilling yellow blankets. But near the far wall, behind an old dresser, the air felt different. I dragged the dresser aside. A small door, barely big enough for a child, was carved into the paneling, a crawl space. My mother's Bible lay beside it, pages torn out and stuffed like a seal into the cracks. I tugged them free. The smell that drifted out was sharp and rotten, like wet soil and something long dead. Inside, the beam of light found scraps of toys, a wooden train, a single baby shoe, and scrawled on the wooden walls, gouged deep by tiny fingers, eyes everywhere. I stumbled back, nearly tumbling down the ladder. When I caught myself and shone the flashlight one last time, I saw it, at the far end of the crawl space, a small, fresh imprint in the dust, as if a boy had just been curled up there listening. I didn't remember crawling down the attic ladder. My hands were splintered, my throat raw from holding back a scream that felt too old to belong to me. I locked the attic door, as if that could hold anything in, and pushed the dresser across it for good measure. But the house felt smaller now, tighter, as if the walls were leaning closer to listen. I packed a bag. I told myself I'd go to the hotel in the next village, just for the night, just enough distance to breathe. Before I left, I went into the kitchen to find my keys. On the counter lay the old notebook, open to a page I hadn't seen yet. My mother's writing there was frantic, letters scratched so deep they nearly tore the paper. He cries when I lock him away. He knocks to come out. The voice says we must keep him quiet. The words blurred as my eyes filled with tears I didn't want. I slammed the notebook shut and fled the house, keys digging into my palm. At the edge of the garden, I paused. Behind me, on the front steps, I heard it, soft, like a child afraid to wake their mother. A voice, Emily. I spun around. No one, just the creak of the porch boards and the night pressing close. I didn't look back again until I was locked inside a stale hotel room 10 miles away, the taste of lavender still sharp in my mouth. The hotel was a squat, ugly building on the edge of the woods, the kind of place people forget exists until they need somewhere cheap to sleep. My room smelled of mildew and leftover cigarettes, but it was clean enough, warm enough, and it wasn't the house. I showered, hoping to wash the feeling of the crawl space off my skin. But when I wiped the steam from the bathroom mirror, I caught it, a flicker behind my shoulder. A shape, tall and thin, standing just inside the bathroom door. I turned so fast I slipped on the wet tiles, but the doorway was empty. The door still locked. I laughed, an ugly, cracked laugh. Nerves, I told myself. No ghosts, just old nightmares slipping through. But when I checked my phone, there was a new video in my gallery. I hadn't taken it. Hands shaking, I pressed play. The footage was grainy, just a few seconds long. The hotel room, seen from the foot of my bed. In the corner, near the bathroom door, stood a boy-shaped shadow. No eyes, just an absence where a face should be. At the end of the clip, a whisper, "Come back. You're still mine." I dropped the phone. It slid under the bed. I didn't pick it up. I spent the rest of the night sitting awake in the hallway outside my room, the door ajar behind me, as if the shadow inside needed space to breathe. I stayed at the hotel 2 more nights. I didn't sleep, not really. I doze off in the lobby chair or with my back pressed to the door, but the dreams always found me. Michael's name written over and over on the walls, a child's voice humming lullabies I half remembered from somewhere dark. On the 3rd night, the mirror above the bed cracked down the middle. In the spiderweb split, I saw a reflection that wasn't mine, a pale boy, wide-eyed, his mouth moving in silent words. I pressed my hand to the glass. It was ice cold. At dawn, I packed my bag again. I don't know why. Maybe part of me understood that whatever this was, it wouldn't stay locked in one house or one attic. If I ran, it would follow. If I hid, it would wait. So I drove back down that narrow road flanked by pines that leaned too close. Back to the garden gate, rusted through with ivy. Back to the porch that still creaked like bones under my step. Inside, the air felt heavier than before, like it was holding its breath for me. The dresser I dragged in front of the attic door was shoved aside. The hatch hung open again, inviting. I stood at the foot of the ladder, my mother's Bible in one hand, the flashlight in the other. I whispered his name for the first time. Michael. From somewhere above me, I swear I heard it back. Emily. I climbed the attic ladder one slow step at a time, bracing myself for the cold draft that leaked from the crawl space. The smell hit me first, damp old cloth and something sour like milk left out too long. The crawl space door was ajar again. Someone, or something, had dragged a trail through the dust. I knelt, shining the flashlight inside, the beam trembling over scraps of paper and toys chewed by time. At the very back, half buried beneath a moth-eaten blanket, I found another notebook, smaller than my mother's, bound with a string. The cover was a faded red, edges frayed. Inside, the handwriting was clumsy, childlike. Simple words, crooked letters. Michael, 1987 to 1994. I sat cross-legged in the dust, flipping the fragile pages. They were filled with drawings, stick figures, a small house, scribbled eyes everywhere. Between them, short, broken sentences. Mama says be quiet. The man in the roof watches. Emily cries when I knock. I stare at that last line until my vision blurred. Some buried memory, so faint I couldn't touch it, scratched at the edges of my mind. Did I hear him once? Did I knock back? Near the end, a final entry, written darker, as if he'd pressed the pencil too hard. Mama says I have to sleep in the dark. The thing is hungry. The page stuck to my fingers. I dropped the diary, scrambled out of the crawl space, and sat gasping among the broken beams. I wasn't alone up here. I never had been. And whatever my mother locked away hadn't died with her. That night, I barely slept. The house hummed around me like a living thing, breathing slow and low. I kept the flashlight close, afraid to close my eyes. Every shadow seemed to flicker, shift, watching. At 3:17 a.m., the footsteps began again. But this time, they weren't on the attic stairs. They were coming down, slow, deliberate, echoing through the creaking hallway. I sat frozen on the sofa, my breath shallow. The air grew colder, and a soft whisper brushed my ear, a voice I hadn't heard in decades. Emily. I looked toward the staircase, heart pounding. Nothing was there, but the shadows gathered like a storm about to break. I stood, trembling, and followed the sound up the stairs to the attic. The door was wide open. Inside, the faint imprint of a small body was visible on the dusty mattress. And then I saw it, a figure, thin and pale, at the far corner, watching me with empty, endless eyes. Michael, I whispered. The shadow tilted its head, and the room plunged into darkness. When the lights returned, I was alone, but the attic held its secrets tighter than ever. My hands shook as I pulled the yellowed photograph from my bag, the one of my mother holding two children, faces pale and haunting. One face was scratched out, a dark blot of ink hiding what should have been there. Underneath, the faded words read, "Emily and Michael, our little sacrifices." I stumbled back, the weight of those words crushing me. What had she done? Why did I not remember a brother, or the horror behind that word? The diary's last pages echoed with my mother's fear, her prayers, and a twisted desperation to protect, or to hide, something beneath the roof. I knew then that Michael wasn't just a lost child. He was part of something older, something dark that had fed on our family for years. And now it wanted me. That night, I heard again, footsteps on the stairs, slow and steady. But this time, they weren't just sounds. They carry a message. Whispered, breathy, desperate. "Come back. You're still mine." I froze. The voice was not angry or cruel, but aching, like a child longing for a mother's touch. I knew it was Michael, or what was left of him. Something trapped, broken, hungry. The house seemed to pulse around me. The walls closed in, the air thickened, and the shadows stretched long fingers toward me. I wanted to run, but my feet didn't move. Instead, I climbed the stairs once more to face the truth. I reached the attic again, the old mattress waiting like a silent altar. The walls, marked with clawed eyes, seemed to watch as I stepped inside. The air was thick, almost suffocating. I opened the last box I'd found. Inside, a faded letter written by my mother. Her handwriting trembled with fear and sorrow. Michael was never meant to live. He was a sacrifice to keep the darkness at bay. The shadow under the roof demands a price, and I paid it. But it hungers still, and now it calls to you. Tears blur my vision. How could she do this? How could she betray her own children for some nameless terror? Suddenly, a cold hand closed around my wrist. I gasped and spun around, but no one was there. The attic door slammed shut. I was trapped, alone with the shadow beneath the roof. Trapped in the attic, the air grew colder, thicker, like it was crushing the light from around me. The shadow stirred from the corner. No longer just a silhouette, but a twisting, dark shape with eyes that burned like coals. It spoke without moving its lips. "You're mine, Emily. You belong beneath the roof, as Michael did." Memories rushed back. A child's screams muffled by silence. My mother's desperate prayers. The weight of blood in the walls. I shook with fear, but something inside me burned brighter. A stubborn spark of defiance. "No," I whispered. "I'm not yours." The shadow lunged, and I closed my eyes, bracing for the cold to swallow me whole. I opened my eyes to find the attic bathed in dawn's pale light. The shadow was gone for now. The oppressive weight lifted, leaving only silence and dust. I took a deep breath and stepped outside, feeling the first warmth I'd known in weeks. But I knew the darkness hadn't disappeared. It lingered in the walls, in the memories, in the house itself. Yet I had a choice now, to run from it, or to face it, to end the cycle my mother began but never finished. I looked back once at the old home nestled beneath the towering trees. "I'm not yours," I said again, and this time I meant it. The footsteps faded, and for the first time I felt free.